City News.
From the streets tonight, a couple of Toronto cabbies were attacked overnight in separate incidents. Francis D'Souza, well, just how common violence is against taxi drivers.
So it was a $3 or $4 fare dispute. I said this, he said this. Eventually he threw a punch, punched my window, broke it into pieces.
Khalid was attacked 6 months ago. Last night, the driver of this cab was threatened with a knife after a fare dispute. And earlier, the driver of this taxi was robbed and carjacked at gunpoint. The suspect even tried to pull out the security camera, even though the images are stored elsewhere. And these stories aren't rare.
A couple of friends, they got robbed last year.
A couple years ago?
Yeah, they snatched the money and went away.
Back in 2005, the city made it mandatory for these cameras to be installed in taxi cabs. While some drivers say crime against them has decreased, others say it's made no difference.
Those cameras and everything is when we get killed. So when I'm dead, you are going to try to dissect and find somebody who killed me. This little petty thing, you think that will stop people from punching you?
Soon, safety shields will be installed in Hamilton cabs. Council gave the go-ahead last night. The drivers here are mixed on whether shields would be a help or a hindrance.
Personally, I like without shield because you have a more room, you have a communication with the customer.
Last year, Toronto did consider installing shields in taxi cabs, but the idea was quashed because it would convey a, quote, terrible image of Toronto to tourists. On Queen's Quay, Francis D'Souza, City News.
Coming up on City News.
There's a lot of flippy-dippy things that happen out there that, you should be aware of.
Cleaning services that will clean you out.
I felt very vulnerable. This woman had been in my home.
How to avoid the mistakes that will cost you when hiring a maid. A U.S. presidential candidate spoke in our nation's capital today. Let's go live now to political specialist Richard Madden with what John McCain had to say about Canada's relationship with the United States. Richard.
And although Canadians can't vote in U.S. elections, the presumptive Republican nominee used a speech right here in Ottawa to take a swipe at his Democratic rival, Barack Obama. John McCain insists his unprecedented Canadian trip wasn't political, rather a glowing tribute to Canada-U.S. relations, an issue that's emerged as a bit of a controversy in the race for the White House.
If you've been following the presidential election, you've probably noticed that Canada comes up for discussion quite a bit these days.
Reading from prepared large text, McCain gave a subtle but sharp dig against his Democratic opponent to this sold-out crowd. You'll recall Barack Obama vowed to renegotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement.
I intend to make certain that every agreement that we sign has the labor standards, the environmental standards, and the safety standards that are going to protect not just workers, but also consumers.
But a McCain administration would defend it.
For all the success of NAFTA, we have to defend it without equivocation in political debate. We have to.
Now, it's believed this is the very first time a presidential candidate has made a trip to Canada in the midst of a campaign. And noticeably absent, Prime Minister Stephen Harper, who some suggest made a last-minute trip to the prairies to avoid being seen by his critics as cozying up to the Republicans. I also had a chance to ask if a President McCain would help Canada's mission in Kandahar. If you're elected president, would you commit to providing more troops in Afghanistan to help the Canadians?
I would obviously have an assessment of what our needs are and then make judgments accordingly.
You'll assess the situation, but that doesn't mean yes or no at this point.
It means that I would have to meet with our leaders